Hello, my name's Alan Newberry, and today we're going to be making one of my pocket cutlasses in a second part of a series of videos that I'm making on stock removal knife making. So, in this video we're going to pick up where we left off and we are going to heat treat, finish grind, and mark my maker's mark on this blade. So, let's go take a look. This is the knife as it was at the end of the last video. It has been cut out from the bar, it has been drilled and ground, and now it is ready for heat treating. The first step of that is going to be hardening. We are using 1095, so in my heat treating oven I'm going to use my second program, which ramps full power from 1 degree all the way up to 1475 degrees and holds it for 3 hours and 10 minutes. And so I am going to set that and get that oven going. I'll put my knife in there once it is heated up, and then after that I'm going to let it sit in there until I think it's come to temperature. Then I'll let it sit for maybe another 5-7 minutes and make sure it's up to heat good and has a little bit of soak time. Then I'm going to pull it out and immediately get it as quick as I can into some Parks 50, which is a commercial quenchant. It's a very fast quenching oil. As soon as I've had that in there, I'll bob it up and down, never side to side or swirling, because I don't want to create any warps. I then look down it to make sure it's not warped or twisted. So I'll look at it from different angles and from different views. And then after that, I may cool it off just a little bit more back in the oil. And then I will take a file, in this case like a chainsaw sharpening file, and skate it over the edge, and if it isn't cutting into the edge, then I know it's gotten hard. Then I'll put it into a preheated oven for 1095. I like it to be around 400 degrees. And so I'll put it in there for 2 2-hour cycles, and then after that it should be nice, and the temperature will have brought that hardness down just a little bit, which will bring the toughness of the knife up and make it less brittle. Now that hardening and tempering has taken place, I'm going to remove the scale from the heat treating process, and to do that I'm going to take my grinder, turn the speed down really low. I've got a well-used 120 grit belt on there, so it's not very aggressive. I will grind off any scale and any bumps left over from the drilling process. So we'll work on the handle, we'll work on the flats, and we'll even get in there and grind off the scale that is in the hollow ground areas as well. One of the trickier places to clean off is going to be the flat that is on the blade area up towards the spine. You'll see here that I'm pinching the tip of that blade, and I'm having to work real hard to keep my knuckles from going onto the contact wheel, so you have to be very careful there. You'll be needing to do that on every grit so that your flats are at a nice finish as well. After cleaning off the scale, I move on to a fresh 120 grit belt, which is what I'm using here, and that's what I will use to refine the edge thickness and my grind heights. And then after that I'll move on to a 220 grit belt, and then after the 220 grit belt I will go to a 400 grit belt. Whenever you get to the 220 is when you can start working on the plunge area, which is one of the trickier areas. So what I'll do there is I will take kind of a slightly older 220 belt, and then I will take a piece of metal and just kind of break the edge of that belt, and I'll run the edge of the belt maybe a 1/4 inch off of the edge of the wheel. And so that right here I'm kind of just breaking the edge of the belt, and then I'm going to take the blade and then I am going to run it right up into that corner, right into that transition area that they call the plunge, which is one of the trickier areas to get right on a knife. It's a very difficult part of the grind. And then I'll continue on with the nice fresh 220 to clean that up a little bit, and then I'll move on to the 400. After cleaning up the plunge area, I'm going to go with the last grit belt that I'm going to use, which is a 400 grit belt. And then I'm going to just clean up those flat areas. You want them to be nice and shiny and have a good finish to them. Then I'm going to move over to the bevel area and make sure those hollow grinds are looking good. And granted, you're going to try to do that at every level, and at each time you're going to be trying to remove the scratches from the previous grit, because when they're at 400 grit,
it's going to be hard to remove a 60 grit scratch. You're going to have to do a lot of grinding to do that, so it's easy to do it with the next grit. Here's the final blade. It's all ground, and it's basically how it's going to look on the knife, but it still needs its maker's mark. So that's what we're going to do here. I've got a Personalizer Plus, which is the model that I use. I use the etch setting, and what that does is removes metal. If you use the mark setting, it kind of removes and puts back on metal, which basically makes it black in color. And to do that, what I use is a set of stencils and that I had made by Ernie Grosbich. I believe Marking Methods also will manufacture stencils to your specifications. And so I will hook up the knife with the little alligator clips there to get an electrical charge going. And then I dip it into my electrolyte and kind of blot that off. It just needs to be damp, and you don't really want it to be dripping wet. Then I turn it up, and then I make sure I got my stencil all lined up well. And you can kind of hold it up to the light to make sure everything looks nice, and then you just run that right on top of the stencil, and you do it, you know, a decent amount of time. You don't want to just hold it on there because it will kind of burn up your stencil, so you maybe do it for a few seconds and then do it for another few seconds after you've had a little break in between. Then I'll neutralize it with a window cleaner with ammonia and kind of scrub in there and clean it up. And then I'll go over to either a 400 grit belt, which was the last belt that I used, or in this case a Scotch-Brite belt. And the Scotch-Brite belt's like a Scotch-Brite pad, except it's in belt form, so that will clean it up really nicely. So I'll just make sure I clean up really well there over where I just made the mark, and then I'll also go ahead and hit up the rest of the grinding areas, including the bevels and the flats. And then this blade will be ready for handle fitment. And here is your finished ground, marked, hardened, and tempered blade.
I hope that you enjoyed today's videos. If you have any questions, please just put them down below in the comments section. And also, we will be having an upcoming third part to this video series in which we work on the handle for the knife. So be sure to subscribe so that you'll know when that comes along. Thanks.